Good evening and welcome to today's special on Microsoft Learn Live with Professor Majd Sakr from Carnegie Mellon University. Over the next few sessions, we're going to be walking through Microsoft Learn modules together with Microsoft Cloud Advocates and Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors. As you all know, Learn is a free resource for anyone. So over the next 5 sessions, we're going to be walking through how Carnegie Mellon and Microsoft Learn have partnered to develop the Cloud Foundations for Cloud Administrator. During each session, we'll have some discussions and be working through some specific hands-on live labs and demos. Over the next few weeks, we'll be working through those activities with those cloud advocates and teams. So I'd like to welcome Professor Majd Sakr on how he's been building skilling with cloud admin. Hi, Majd.
Hi, Lee. Thank you for inviting me.
So I'm really looking forward to today's session where we're going to be having lots of demos and getting to grips with how you've been working to develop these amazing courses and how we've been using Microsoft Learn and project-based learning. So all the modules are completely available for free on Microsoft Learn. And again, we want you to take part, undertake these activities and share your experiences of how you're using Microsoft Learn. Over the next hour, we have next 90 minutes, we've got a group of expert moderators standing by to answer questions. And you can give those questions directly to me, Majd, and the other speakers. Again, we'll open up to questions throughout the sessions. So again, please use the chat with the moderators. They're there to help you. And you're able to watch this on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, or Learn TV. So head over there and join the chat. So for those who are on the chat, we'd like to just understand who you are and get to know a little bit about you. So if you could just answer the following questions to what type of audience you are. So if you're a student, please select A. If you're a teacher, please select B. If you're a professional developer, please select C. If you're a professional IT administrator, press D. And if you're another, press E. So Majd, what are you expecting to really get out of today's show?
Well, what I'm hoping is to encourage as many folks who are watching this live streaming event to get very enthusiastic and excited about developing their skill sets in cloud computing, data science, AI, and machine learning. The statistically is that 61% of tech jobs in the future will be outside the tech sector. And that shows you what a wide adoption of technology is happening across the globe. And what I'd like to do is encourage as many of the listeners as possible, whether you're a student or an educator. If you're a student, there are lots of awesome tools out there, specifically here, Microsoft Learn, that will help you get close to preparing yourself for a job. And for the educators, there are lots of tools as well. We're going to present one today that you can adopt so that you can teach these types of courses within your institutions.
Excellent, Majd. So again, hopefully we've got some good answers there from the type of people within the audience. And again, we want to try and focus on every single type of audience. So we're going to be covering lots of different questions. Again, if you want to ask questions, please get involved on the actual chat channel and ask us questions. Again, we have moderators available who can support you. So in terms of the next question is, have you ever used Microsoft Learn? It's very simple. If you've used Learn, click A for yes. Click B for no. Again, we want to get people utilizing Microsoft Learn and sharing your experience. So Majd, have you used Microsoft Learn?
Yes, absolutely. We've actually developed content for Microsoft Learn. And so it's actually quite surprising how much content exists on Microsoft Learn. And the other encouraging trajectory is that the content is improving regularly, and it's including lots of interactivity as well as hands-on training. So it's quite remarkable the large effort that's being invested to develop that much content that's available to anyone around the world, so that they can develop their skill sets just by pointing their browsers to it and investing the time so that they can develop those skills.
Definitely, there's over 2,000 modules now available on Microsoft Learn, covering a wide variety of technologies. And again, there's full learning pathways and tracks. So if you're interested in just starting at a very introduction level, you can start there. Or if you're interested in becoming certified or professional certified, we have learning pathways there. So we're having a packed agenda for you today. Throughout the sessions, we'll hope that you'll hear many opportunities of how to get started on your cloud journey as a cloud administrator. We have topics from both Carnegie Mellon staff and students, so Professor Majd and his team, and we also have students who have undertaken the course, sharing their experiences about why you should be learning to become a cloud administrator. So let's get started by quickly going over an introduction to your course, Majd. So could you tell us a bit more about what you and your team have been working on?
Absolutely. Happy to dive right in. So the basic idea is what we started the conversation with, which is there's a large demand on people that have these kinds of skill sets right now, people that can develop solutions in cloud computing, people that can do analysis on data science, and people that can develop, deploy, and monitor and update machine learning models to solve a variety of problems. And what's happening, Lee, is because this demand is so high and all the universities have not multiplied the number of graduates by a factor of 10, there isn't the supply to meet that demand. And that's why I'm trying to encourage everyone on this call to recognize that there are plenty of jobs in the future, now and in the future, in these domains. So our effort of building the SAIL platform, SAIL, and we have the two parens to capture the idea of developing technology solutions. And the idea is for social and interactive learning platform. And that's a platform that we have developed in collaboration with Microsoft, and I'm happy to tell you more about it today, so that we can offer an online platform for educators and students who would like to develop their skills so that they can adopt these courses within their institutions and start to become better trained so that they can satisfy the demands of these jobs in cloud computing specifically, which is the topic of today.
Excellent. So, Majd, you're the creator of the Cloud Admin and Cloud Developer course from CMU, which is available on both Microsoft Learn and within SAIL. So can you give us a bit more idea about what the motivation was behind the development of these courses?
Yeah, so Lee, what we tried to do is we tried to first analyze and say, what's happening out there? Lots and lots of enterprises are capturing a lot of data. And people want to move their workloads to the cloud because they do not want to manage the compute, networking, and storage resources themselves. And they also want to deploy machine learning models on the cloud as well. So if you notice, there's a huge demand for this kind of technical expertise, and this gap is continuing to widen. So what we would like to do is we would like to develop a competitive workforce that once the workforce goes to their interview, they get the job, and once they start the job, that means they hit the ground running and they start adding value immediately. And the idea is, how do you develop a competitive workforce that can go beyond knowing about the domain, that they can do in the domain? And that has been our main driver here, Lee.
Yeah, excellent. In terms of like the whole demand for the future workforce, this is really key. And, we've got some key bullet points on the screen at the moment around how, your goal is to really be able to, number one, drive and capture the growing audience, because it's a huge growing skill set of cloud administration. Again, really understanding that opportunity of what the skill gaps are. People who have been traditionally IT pro or IT administrators have come really from an internal data center, whether it's a small resource within an organization, to now having to look at cloud to really supplement or deliver that cloud service as their enterprise grows. So what do you feel the key challenges are for that reskilling of a workforce?
It's a different mindset, because what you have to do is you have to keep up and recognize that the services on the cloud are evolving pretty rapidly. And you need to understand the pros and cons of a wide array of services, so that when your users come to you and say, I would like to deploy this kind of application on the cloud, and you understand its requirements, then you can suggest the proper solution, help deploy their application in a scalable manner so that if the load grows and shrinks, it's able to react to that kind of dynamic load, and to orchestrate the deployment, monitor the deployment, secure the deployment, and then recover in case you encounter any kind of failure. So those are the types of skills that people will have to develop, and so that they can get themselves to the cloud and they can add value within their institution. Now, the main driver here, Lee, about how do we develop a competitive workforce here is that we have to make sure we look at what the science tells us. And research has confirmed to us the effectiveness of learning by doing, which we call project-based learning. And the idea here is we don't want to develop individuals that can only use today's tools. We want to develop individuals that can keep up with the ongoing evolution of the tools. So the idea is we want their self-efficacy, or in other words, their confidence level in terms of how do they solve problems under a variety of contexts to be high. And we want them to be self-driven and motivated so that they can continue to develop their abilities. And then very importantly, that their problem-solving skills, and every individual is going to face a variety of different sets of problems for the different contexts. And so project-based learning has been proven to develop all of these, and that's why we have adopted this approach for all of the courses that we offer.
So, project-based learning, in my terms, that's like hands-on experience. It's literally, understanding how you would complete this task within Azure Portal or within the Azure CLI.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, Lee. What we do is we say, hello, Lee, welcome to the course. You've recently received the following job. This is your title, and here are your tasks. So we give you a real data set, and we give you a real problem, and you want to develop a solution for that, and then we help you slowly develop your solution until it meets all the requirements. And that's really what project-based learning is all about.
So it's literally give the students a problem, and they have to work through those steps of, architecture, implementation, support, maintenance, reliability,
absolutely,
and operation. Yeah, excellent.
Right.
So again, tell us a little bit more about how you actually do that in terms of your ecosystem and the platforms that you run to gather this research data.
Yeah, so when we want to, so I know Microsoft Learn has already has a lot of the content that we have developed, but what we are doing, because we want to also have a research-based platform that allows us to ask questions and answer them based on how people are learning. So what we do, if you notice in that first box, we say learning science research. So we ask a research question, and then we build the technology tools that are needed so that we can instrument what is needed so that we can run the experiment needed to answer that research question. And then we build the courses, which we call here the training pathways. And now we go and offer these courses that have this experiment already pre-built in, and we offer them to learners. And the learners go and interact with that technology, and they develop their skill sets while we are capturing data so that we can understand, did method 1 prove to be more effective than method 2? Under these circumstances, is method 1 more efficient than another method? And so then we ask our next research question, and then we develop the tools, and then we instrument the pathways, and so on and so forth. So the idea here of the SAIL platform is that it's an entire ecosystem, so that all of the educators that are on the call today that would like to adopt SAIL as part of their institution, all of the educators can say, hey, I am an evidence and data-driven educator, and I know what is causing my students to learn and what is causing my students to struggle. And that's the whole idea of the SAIL platform. So,
excellent.
Excuse me. So the idea is to build the infrastructure, the courses, and to run research projects, and then hopefully grow a community. So for all of the educators on the call, I would encourage you to jump on the SAIL platform and let us know that you're interested. And then together we can collaborate to answer important research questions and share them with the wider community.
That's great, Majd. So I know that from a research pedagogy perspective, CMU have produced over 15 research papers around pedagogy based on the research that you've done in SAIL. And again, that's driven a lot of the activities we've done in partnership around Microsoft Learn and hands-on labs and the sandbox and module environments, which now educators are using. So we have a question for the audience, and they would like to understand a little bit more about project-based learning, its conceptual content, practical tutorials, hands-on projects, and how do they actually work?
Yeah, this is a brilliant question. The whole idea is, first, what we want to do is to make sure that the foundational concepts are there and understood by the learner. So there's there are the conceptual topics that we cover, and those are akin to what you learn in a lecture or what you read in a book. And there are assessments for those to make sure that you do have the foundational concepts. And then on the other side, there are the hands-on training aspects of this, which is now that you know the foundation, let's put you in a real-world scenario and see if you can develop that solution. And so to make sure, because we have learners of a variety of backgrounds, Lee, we cannot assume that every learner has the necessary prerequisites. So what we have done is we have built these primers, which are tutorials that will give you the necessary prerequisites so that you can actually do and complete the project, and you don't have to go somewhere else on the internet to develop your skill sets there. And that keeps everything nice and self-contained in terms of the learner being able to focus to get the skills developed.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think that aligns perfectly well with what we're doing with Microsoft Learn in terms of the modules, the knowledge checks, the sandboxes. So it's that linear journey from start to finish of understanding the concepts, having hands-on in terms of the implementation, the practical of actually doing that implementation, and then the knowledge check to validate the understanding of that implementation. So another great question from the audience is, if the pace of evolving technology increases, can any human being ultimately be able to keep up? So what's your thoughts on the pace of change?
So for the routine things that we have to do, that means react to a change in the load, or we encounter some sort of failure or something like that. For all of these things, they need to be automated out. But the solving and the creativity of coming up with innovative solutions for today's problems and tomorrow's problems will continue to be with the human being, and we hope our job is to make the human being as productive and as effective as possible. And the idea here is, how can we make sure that the human beings are being productive and are not wasting their time with anything that is routine or maintenance that can be done using automation. We're going to be talking about that in a second.
Yeah, and that's a perfect introduction into this whole collaborative learning. We've been working very close together, utilizing things like Visual Studio Code Spaces and GitHub Code Spaces for IDEs in the cloud. Also using tools like BS Live Share, so the ability for teams or individuals to work, especially remotely because of COVID, but more importantly, in that collaborative approach. And, COVID's had massive changes to how you've implemented your courses. And again, you're actually building some custom extensions now for Visual Studio Code around your inclusive development environment to really build this collaborative learning approach. So give us some examples of that.
Yeah, this is super cool. And we hopefully will be releasing something to the wider audience very, very soon on this. So Lee, if you wanted to develop a skill set, the best model is apprenticeship, where you can go and work with an expert, and she or he will take you under their wing and then show you how to do things, watch you developing solutions, and giving you that timely, very important feedback at the right time so that you can incorporate it. So this idea is great, but it does not scale. The question is, how can we scale this? So this solution feedback cycle between the person who is learning and the expert in the domain is critical, because this is how human beings learn. This is how we learn how to improve our basketball shot. We take a shot, and then someone gives us some feedback, move your elbow in, follow through with the ball, whatever it is. We incorporate that feedback immediately and try again. Well, in technology education, we need to enable that as well. The human being needs to receive that timely feedback so that they can incorporate it. So let's stay on that slide, Lee. So the idea here is we want to develop systems that can take the solution that the learner is learning, that the learner has developed, and then we give them that timely feedback. The other idea here that is very important is how can we leverage collaborative learning? Well, when do we collaborate is when the problem becomes quite sophisticated and complex. And that's when we bring a group of human beings and everyone shares their opinion, or everyone tries to make the solution better by criticizing it or identifying its limitations or providing better ideas. So that's a ripe opportunity for people to learn from each other. So what we have done, we have instrumented Visual Studio Online, LiveShare, GitHub code spaces, so that we can get a group of individuals and we give them roles, and there is a bot that orchestrates the collaboration between these individuals. And sometimes the bot triggers a potential disagreement between the individuals, because the research shows is when you and I don't necessarily agree on a particular idea and we have to convince each other about the merit of it, that's when we learn from one another. And so this is a very valuable way for us to leverage collaborative learning so that the entire group of learners can benefit from everyone's skill set.
Yeah, excellent point. You know, that whole ability to debate and discuss and review is really important to any learning pedagogy. And I think that's something key that is really around this whole evidence-based learning approach.
Yep.
So if you just want to talk us through some of these of how, you know, you actually see these working.
Yes, so let's go a little faster through these, because so the basic idea here, Lee, is we start with the primers. The primers are these tutorials to make sure that the people have the necessary background. And then what we do is we say, okay, now that we believe you know the basic knowledge, now let's put you in a collaborative activity and see if you can actually solve some basic tasks within that domain with the help of a group of other individuals who are in the same boat. And then what we do is we give each individual, they have to go and use that iterative approach where they get that timely feedback. So that's when they experiment and explore solutions, and that's where true learning happens. And then they reach the endpoint of their solution. And then we add that reflection piece where we say, Lee, you've solved the problem. What were the challenges that you overcame? And the research there shows that if you have to articulate how you overcame challenges and how did you make your decisions, then that will help you access them easier in the future. Now, the next step there is what we say, now please look at other students' reflections and give them feedback on it. So now we expose you to how other people are thinking. And from that point, then the teaching staff gives you this expert feedback. And then finally, what we do is we say, now that you've solved the problem, reflected, and you've gotten feedback, can you evaluate other people's code? And code review is a critical skill to learn in today's technology domain. And now you're no longer the developer of a solution, you're also the evaluator of your peers. And that's a very important skill to develop as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that, you know, that whole task process as well is about both, you know, ideation. So, you know, how am I going to approach this task? And then also the evolving of that task. So, you know, how do we iterate? How do we change this? How do we make it more effective or more efficient? And as you said, you know, code review is so important to every, you know, students learning to go out there in industry, be able to analyze code, look at code, comment on code, review code. It's a key skill. So in terms of like maturing technologies, and this really feeds back to the question we had earlier about, you know, how can human beings ultimately keep up with the change of technology? You know, if we look at cloud technologies, we have all these various different aspects, which are now really part of cloud computing. So how do you approach and tackle that scenario from a student learning perspective?
Yeah, so Lee, cloud computing is the idea of moving technology from a product to a service that you lease, and then you pay for what you use. And the question is, for us to get to this idea of cloud computing, not one individual was sitting in their office one day and then they got that brilliant idea. It required years and years of development and maturation of a lot of technologies and and solutions that will enable the idea of cloud computing, of leasing compute as a service. So you need low latency, high bandwidth connection to the cloud, because the cloud is sitting somewhere far away from you, but it needs to feel like it's right there on your device. So that's what the internet helps solve. And then you want anything that you're interacting with on your browser to feel like it's a native application running on your device. And that's what Web 2.0 provides. And then if the cloud were to encounter any failure, the end user should not notice any difference. And that's where the domain of fault tolerance has solved a lot of these problems. And then how do you take a group of 10 or 10,000 computers so that they can come and orchestrate and work together so that they can solve a variety of problems? And that's where the domain of parallel and distributed computing came in. And then how do you charge for the cloud when you're leasing it? Is it by the hour? Is it by the gigabyte? Is it by how much power you use? So utility computing has come up with different models. And then how do you program this large cloud, whether you're developing a mobile application or a gaming platform? It needs to be easy. And then how do you store a variety of data, whether you're streaming data like the data we're streaming right now, or whether you are saving log data of how did people click in an e-commerce site? And then finally, this idea of virtualization. How do we allow two individuals like you and me to run our applications on the same physical resource without them affecting each other, and then where we can grow and shrink the amount of resources they get? So they have to have a reasonable amount of isolation, security, and performance so that they can coexist together. And that way, the cloud provider can amortize the cost of the large cloud on a very large number of users, and they can move them around in the cloud and not have them affect each other's performance or have access to each other's data. So those are the technologies that enabled the domain of cloud computing.
Yeah, so really these are like the fundamental pillars of what is required. And then, as we talked about earlier, technology changes, but they're all within these key pillar areas. So things like virtualization and the size of virtual machines will become bigger and become cheaper.
Well,
so
whether
that
it's
impacts.
Yeah, whether it's virtual machines or containers or functions as a service, the encapsulation model changes, but the basic ideas have the same solid foundation, which we want individuals to share without affecting each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, if you have any questions on this, please feel free to ask those in the chat. Again, we're more than happy to answer those throughout the session. So we talked about the maturing technologies, and now we know that these are the key pillars to how cloud administration works, and these pillars are core parts of the Microsoft Learn modules and the CMU module. So if we look at these core pillars, this is the current construct of the CMU course in terms of those pillars and the explanation of those pillars along with those hands-on projects. Could you give us some idea of how this actually works in terms of, how do you actually implement this? What are the key areas of learning? How does assessment take place?
Yeah. This is a very important slide. So for whoever's attending, this is what it takes for you to become a cloud administrator. So whether you're a learner or an educator, stick with us here and let's get through this. So for you to become a cloud administrator, what we did is we went and looked at jobs that have the title cloud administration in them. And we tried to understand what are the skills that people ought to know so that they can become a cloud administrator. Okay. And the basic idea, Lee, is whatever is in blue are our foundational concepts that people should know. And whatever that we have in red is what's coupled with it in terms of the hands-on training. So the M1 through M9 are the modules, and the P0 through P8 are the hands-on projects, where P0 is not necessarily a graded project where we just get people started. So the idea here is, just like when you asked me earlier, what does it take to become an administrator? Well, you need to be able to say, I have a large group and they all want to use the cloud. How can I group the resources on the cloud for marketing and engineering and research so that they use the cloud and I know which group is using what? And then how can I manage the identity of these different users and their roles within my organization, and which data they can access and which data they should not be able to access? And then how do I provision resources on the cloud, whether it's compute, networking, storage, and how do I manage access to it? The next step is, Well, if I deploy an application to the cloud, how can I make sure that that application is elastic? That means if that application becomes popular and there are, from 1,000 to 100,000 people are accessing it now, it continues to respond in time and it meets the quality of service requirements that it has. So that's the whole win of the cloud, Lee, is that it can grow and shrink based on the amount of resources that you currently need, and those are the resources that you lease. And then when
definitely. And I think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think this is great introduction to the subsequent Learn Live series that we have. So we'll be focusing on some of these specific areas, so like elasticity, monitoring, and security, where we'll actually go in hands-on into those modules to see what the skills are and how you actually do this. So great introduction there to those as well.
Yeah, and then the next piece is, how do you orchestrate that deployment? How do you monitor that deployment to make sure it's doing what it's doing? And then how do you secure it? And then how do you recover in case you encountered some sort of a disaster in your cloud? So all of these skills are the core skills that are needed by a cloud administrator, and those are the ones that we focus on in our course.
Excellent. And again, we'll be talking a little bit more around this in a short while with Marshall, who's one of the project scientists within your team. And we'll have some demos as well of the experience from the CMU students' perspective and the experience from Microsoft Learn. And again, I'm really excited to see those activities in a few minutes. So let's welcome Marshall, who is one of the project scientists at Carnegie Mellon University.
Thank you, Lee, for inviting me today. I'm Marshall, a project scientist in the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. I have several years of experience in technology-enhanced learning and educational data mining. So I currently own the design and development of both the infrastructure and curricula for the CL platform at Carnegie Mellon.
Excellent, Marshall, and welcome to today's session. So, as you said, you're the key brains behind the infrastructure and the setup at CMU. Again, really, in terms of the structure, could you tell us a bit about, the things that you think are most important for today's learners and what skills they need to achieve?
Oh, sure. There are two types of skills that we aim at training our learners. The first category apparently is the technical skills, right? The learners need to solve real-world problems by leveraging cloud technologies. And in every hands-on project, we challenge them with real-world problem, which means the project setting won't be perfectly sanitized. So if we give them a data set, it's a real-world data set, which means they can include some malformed records that have to inspect the data and handle them properly before analyze the data set. And if they need to implement auto-scalable web service, we occasionally will kill one instance of their cluster, and they have to be able to gracefully handle the traffic and redirect to the healthy node. And the second category is their problem-solving skill, and also learn how to learn. For example, in the primers, we have the short tutorials to get them ready for the actual hands-on assignments. When they are working on the actually graded hands-on projects, students to transfer their learning in order to solve the problem in the projects. So in the primers, we give them work examples on similar problems, but they have to understand the knowledge inside out in order to transfer the learning and solve a slightly different problem. And over the projects, we will reduce the level of scaffolding. The project will be less and less structured as students become mature over time.
Excellent. So in terms of the topic areas, we've got a list of the topic areas on the screen that each of the students do. We also have David Gilbraith with us, who's a recent graduate of the course. So nice to meet you, David. We'll be spending some more time with you in a few minutes. But from your perspective, how do you see these topic areas being really relevant to you as a student on the course?
I think David is muted.
So Majd, would you like to comment on how do you see these skills being really relevant to someone on the cloud admin course?
Yeah, David, did you unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mean,
You're back to being muted, David.
I think we'll come back to David in a second. I think he's having network issues. So Majd.
Yes.
Sorry, could you just tell us a little bit, in terms of those core topics, what are the key areas that, you need to look at from the cloud admin skills?
Yeah, I mean, this is a rehash of the prior topics that we covered, and those were our driving forces behind our design. So it's understanding the cloud computing paradigm. How did it come about, and why is it such a force to reckon with that all of the enterprises are saying, I would like to move my workloads to the cloud? So there are economic reasons, security reasons, cost reasons, all of these reasons. So these people will have to know that. And then how do you adopt the cloud? And what are the different models and services, whether you are going fully on the public cloud, or whether you're going to have a private cloud for your institution, or you're going to have a hybrid cloud where some of your workloads are running on the cloud and some of your workloads are running on your private cloud. So those are the different models that people adopt. And then there's accounts, subscriptions, and identities like we spoke, role-based access control. How do you provision compute, networking, and storage? And I think on the next slide, we talk about elasticity, we talk about monitoring, and then orchestration, security, and disaster recovery. So those are the main topic areas within this course, Lee.
Yeah, excellent. So in terms of the next slide, let's just look at the next slide in terms of the content, and then we'll come back to David in a second because I know he's having issues. So, really, we look at those different fundamentals. So like configure and deploy and monitor is really key. As Marshall said, orchestration tools and DevOps is like one of the big key areas. So Marshall, could you tell us about DevOps and how, people with DevOps skills are really in demand around the current climate?
Oh, sure. I would say the core philosophy of DevOps is automation. You need to automate your development and deployment lifecycle to transform your source code committed to the deployed applications. You also need to automate the infrastructure. In real world, we need to manage a complex infrastructure at scale. Apparently, we cannot simply use the web portal, click here and there to provision and configure all the resources. And with the command line interface, it's also not as robust in long term. Therefore, one core concept that we also introduced in the cloud admin course is infrastructure as code. So this allows you to define the infrastructure and their dependencies with code. Therefore, your infrastructure will be reproducible, and you can also track the changes over time.
So again, real key things about automation. We have a dedicated session on automation coming up, which I think, again, is so key to those skills. In terms of things like backup and redundancy and recovery, what are the key things there that you think are key from a learner's perspective?
Sure. I think the first concept to bear in mind is that there's no 100% SLAs if you just develop all your cloud resources in one region, because all the cloud resources are actually virtualized based on physical hardware. And sometimes if there's an earthquake or electricity shutdown, one region could be rendered unavailable for several hours, and you do not want to be out of the business just because of such an incident. And therefore, it's always best practices to replicate your deployment in multiple regions across the globe, and also into plan for recovery in case say you lost the host of virtual machines, or you lost your database. So you should have a scheduled backup plan, so that in case of data loss or resource loss, you can recover the resources and your business as soon as possible.
Yeah, excellent. I think that really touches on, again, one of the early questions the audience asked was around the whole scale of cloud and thinking about things from that geographical basis. So putting data and resources as close to the edge, as close to your customer base as possible. It reduces latency, it increases performance. Again, reliability is really key.
It's so powerful, right? I mean, anywhere in the world, you can deploy your application anywhere else in the world for a global audience. I mean, that's such an enabling power, and that's why it's so attractive for the enterprise, and that's why the adoption is happening so quickly.
Excellent. So I'm hoping that David now has his internet connection working successfully. So I'd like to introduce you to David Gilbraith, who is a graduate of the CMU course. David, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
We can. If you could turn on your camera as well. Excellent.
There you go.
So hopefully your internet's good. So welcome, David. The joys of the internet and working from home and COVID. So we're all used to this. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your and what you've just done at CMU?
Oh, so I just spent the last 6 months working with Dr. Sakr in the cloud admin course, learning how to become a cloud administrator. The program that I'm working through right now is kind of a two-phase program, where the first portion is in class through project-based learning, and the second portion is hands-on, actually ingrained in a real life artificial intelligence machine learning type project.
Excellent. So again, we've all lived in this COVID situation now for over a year. So how has learning remotely worked? Or have you actually been in class? Have CMU allowed students on campus?
Yes, we've mostly worked from home, but we have been in weekly in order to do in-class learning.
Excellent. So Marshall, from your perspective, trying to run the infrastructure of this course, how has COVID been for you? Have you had to change things?
Yeah. So first, fortunately, our team has started the endeavor of the online education several years ago, before the epidemic. At the same time, say for the Army course, we have orchestrated weekly lectures and fireside talks to broaden a student horizon, so that they can map their conceptual learning and the hands-on projects into the real world scenarios.
Excellent. So David, as Marshall said, you're part of the Army Training Corps going through the CMU course, and you've been covering the topic areas that we discussed earlier with Professor Majd, and you've been doing those both in class and both remotely. So what has your experience been as a student of this whole project-based learning activity, where you learn the fundamentals, you're then given a problem, and then you undertake that hands-on activity?
Absolutely. So the project-based learning method, if I were to put into a word, I would say that it's unsettling and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, and you kind of tossed into something a little bit before you're ready. In transparency, when I joined the course, I had absolutely no experience in cloud administration or cloud computing, and over the last 6 months, I've definitely been able to sequence or build upon experiences that have made me not only comfortable with just interacting with the cloud environment, but also administrating different resources in different ways. So it's been very enlightening.
Yeah, and when you say, it's you're actually given a problem-based scenario and said, go away and build or design or implement the infrastructure to this. So it's literally very much hands-on in the Azure portal, building, deploying with either the portal or CLI or other tools. So in terms of that hands-on learning approach, you're in the US Army. So what problem-solving skills did you use to approach those problems?
Well, one thing that was really helpful about the course and the skills that you develop is, when you're in a traditional lecture-based class, you kind of get the information given to you, whereas in the real world, and then also in more the project-based learning lifestyle, you have to go out and find that answer. And as an employee or as a professional or a leader, if a problem was easy to solve, then they wouldn't be coming to you to solve it. So in that case, I think in the real world, it helps to get experience to have the grit and create a culture in which that it's okay to not know the answer and then go find it.
Excellent. So from that hands-on learn approach, do you feel it was valuable experience to have undertaken?
Oh, absolutely. I've had the experience kind of coming from the other side and as an instructor, and then looking at it from the student's perspective. It's definitely a completely flipped way to look at things. It was a great experience, and it's something that you might not see the returns right away, but as you continue to build that experience, the learning curve is shortened. And you are much more effective, particularly in a technical background, where the only way that you can really learn how to do something like that is by physically doing it.
Yeah, excellent. So Marsha, from like a teaching assistant and support perspective, how do you see that growth in students? They come in for the first week and, it's quite intimidating. They're actually going to be using cloud services. And then by the end of the course, they're building, scaling, deploying, monitoring, managing. So how do you see that change?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Yeah, I would say it's such an amazing experience that every semester we observe our learners become mature so rapidly through projects. Probably as the very first one or two projects, students could get frustrated whenever there's a challenge by design. But soon they have adopted the problem-solving model that if they run into an error, they search this error message online and try to collect meaningful information. If they would like to ask a question and discuss the problem with teaching staff, you can tell that their student ability to articulate question or technical issue greatly improve over time, that at the end of the semester they can so precisely articulate a problem that we can immediately dive into a meaningful conversation. Yeah, so this is really amazing, and we believe this is how project-based learning enabled the student growth.
Yeah, so that was again really picked up by Majd earlier on in terms of that whole primer, task, evaluation, feedback, and then the review. And I think that is really well demonstrated. So we've got a great question from the audience. So again, audience, please feel free to ask us questions. So the question is to both. Well, I'll start with David. The question is what is your favorite part of the course that you undertook in terms of cloud admin? So David.
Well, so I actually had two parts that I really dug into and I really appreciated. The first one was the identity access management portion of the course. Just as a leader and probably focused more on that project management as well as the administration portion, being able to really understand how you could to make sure the right people are in the right place at the right time in terms of resources. was really enlightening to actually do that. And the second one that I just really loved was the infrastructure as code, just with how truly scalable that is. And you can create, it's very powerful in order to orchestrate the deployment of cloud resources, and it was an experience that I hadn't had in my life before, as opposed to just doing one thing at a time.
Excellent. So, Marshall, from your perspective, what's the most enjoyable part to set up and give the students?
Sure. In regards to the projects, my favorite is the infrastructure as code project. The students use Terraform to declare the desired state of infrastructure, which is a very interesting approach. You define what resources you want. You don't need to tell Terraform how. And in regards to this is about the course content, and my favorite about the pedagogy perspective, I would say, is the reflection activity, as Majd introduced. So after each project, our students will reflect on their learning. There's so many interesting stories, and it's amazing to observe that students are able to evaluate and compare alternative options and decide which path they would like to choose.
Excellent. So, David, you've gone through this course, and one of the great things around what CMU have done is created a certification alignment. So on the screen, you should be able to see a slide around the current courses and certificates that have been aligned to the CMU course. So we start off with the AZ900 Azure Fundamentals, the CompTIA Cloud Essentials, and then ideally we'd love students to work up to AZ104, which is the Azure Administrator. So tell us a little about, have you done these? How did you find them? What's your experiences?
Oh, yeah. So we began the certification process after being in the course for about 3 to 4 months, and we started with the Azure Fundamentals and the Cloud Essentials Plus. I was able to complete those certifications with some studying and background from the course prior to the new year, and I recently took the Azure Administrator course for the second time, and I got to experience. I got to grow from getting to take it 2 times, but I recently passed that last week. So
excellent. So you've come out now with your qualification from CMU, so well done, plus AZ900 and CompTIA Essentials and AZ104. So you are now a certified cloud administrator. So the course did what it was intended to do. So it's great to hear that news. So, what's your next steps then? How do you see this now going forward into your career?
Well, within the next half year, at least, I will be beginning to. I'm working as a project and technical lead on a couple projects, but so my background in operating in the cloud will help me to better lead that. But I will also be. I'm actually about to start constructing my first cloud-based data management environment, and I'm going to take that on my shoulders to actually put a little practical experience, something on my back. So that'll be exciting, and then hopefully in the next year I'll be transitioning other organizations to a cloud-based environment, helping with that architecture, and then transition to the administration side.
Awesome. So yeah, huge thank you, David, for your time, and we'll welcome you back in a few minutes after Marshall is now going to go through some demos. So I'd like to just welcome back Marshall to talk a little bit more around how CMU are actually teaching the course and the technologies within the course. And he's going to actually go through 2 demos. One demo will be based on the SAIL infrastructure, and then one demo will be based on the Microsoft Learn modules. So as I said, Microsoft Learn modules are available here. So again, we'll work through those examples. And again, if you want to look at those, if you look at aka.ms CMU Cloud Admin, CMU Admin, sorry, you'll be able to to look at those resources. So Marsha, would you like to share your screen and we can go through a couple of demos? There you go, that's correct.
part in the hands-on project.
Yep.
Now let's say a learner has finished the learning of all the primers and now is ready to dive into the graded hands-on tasks. So here I'm going to assume that we already finished task 1, which is all about setting up your Microsoft account. And here I'm going to do a demo with task 2. And in the cloud admin course, this is the very first time the student will provision a cloud resource on Microsoft Azure. So the product student will interact with is the Azure app service. that enable user to easily deploy static or dynamic web applications. And students will use the Azure command line interface. So students will need to decide on what commands to execute. So now let's get started. The very first step is to create a resource group. Here we have the specification, but not worked code, a worked command that they can just copy and paste, because students need to transfer the learning in the primers or search the Azure documentation. Here they need to create a resource group named My Resource Group with the East US location. And for example, we can check if there are solution to a similar problem in the primer. And they can say, okay, so here is the command, it's easy group create, which is the command to create the resource group. But we need to change the values for the parameters here. So let's start working with the commands. And here we are using the Azure Cloud Shell. This is a browser-based terminal, so that no matter which operating system you have, you can have this consistent environment that you can immediately start writing command line commands and scripts. So this is the first command we need. Let's check the name we need to specify here, which is My Resource Group. And how about the locations? So it's also the East US, so we can just use that easy. And let's execute it. And it's done. So we finished our first command. Now let's move on to the second command, which is to create an app service plan.
So what's really good about this, Marshall, is that you're actually just using the Azure portal and the Azure Cloud Shell. The student is doing nothing on their local machine. They're literally just using the Azure portal itself. So Cloud Shell is a really lovely feature that allows you to have either Bash or PowerShell integration with Azure itself. And again, the student is actually working through deploying that environment directly within their Azure subscription. So just to do a bit of a recap. So as Marshall said, we have primers, which are the introduction to the module. Those primers are what we would call prerequisites in Microsoft Learn. The student, once they're happy with the prerequisites, can actually undertake the assessed module, which the same students do. And we're working through that assessed module of using the Azure CLI to deploy an app service and a web app into the app service.
Thank you, Lee. And as you can see, the second command already finished. So we already have the web app plan created. So now we can move on to the final command. So the app service plan here is the compute resources where you will deploy one or multiple web app. And the third command is to create and deploy an actual web application to the app service plan we just provisioned in the second command. So here, let's execute the third command. We also need to specify a globally unique name. So let's say Carnegie Mellon, Microsoft Lab Demo. And I'm going to execute this command to deploy a web app. And Lee, just for your information, as you can see, I actually made a mistake on purpose here.
Yeah, I was going to say, you missed a tag, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very critical to always remember to leverage tags and metadata to annotate the purpose and ownership of cloud resources. For example, if there are multiple departments, you want to specify for this resource group or a resource, does it belong to the IT department or the research department? So through the course, we always require students to tag the resources. But here I just made a mistake so that we can say what greater feedback we will get when we submit our solution.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point around, tags are used by identification, cost management. And again, as you say, from an evaluation perspective, this is really key in evaluating has the student read, understood both the prerequisites of primers and the actual task. So you've made a mistake, so let's see what happens.
Okay, surely. So we have already completed the activity required in task 2. It's time for us to make a submission to the auto grading service developed by the CEL team. In order to make a submission, the learner needs to download a submitter, a binary. And make the submitter executable. And also to make a submission, as you can expect, the learner needs to provide their identity, which includes their username, and also a submission token that they can find here. So now we are ready to run the submitter. And here we are submitting to task 2. Let's double check the command. Yep, it is correct. Let's run it. And to confirm that I have been honest when I'm working on this project. All right, so now the submitter has describe the state of the student Azure account and serialize the result, say how many resource groups, how many resources, what is configuration of each resource. And the result is sent to the auto grading service. And the student gets the prompt that, oh, your submission is successfully submitted and it's being processed. Now you can go back to the CEL platform and check the grading outcome. So now let's go to the submission tab. And we just submitted to task 2. All right, so the full score of task 2 is 30 points, but I only get 25. Not bad, it's a nice start, but let's see what mistake we make. So here is the feedback. And as you can see here, the feedback is far beyond the correctness. When we designed the hands-on project and the graders, we made the grade feedback verbose, precise, and actionable. For example, in this task, we make it transparent and tell students, this is the rule that they are evaluating your solution with. Your account should have Azure Web App configured as follows with 3 requests. You have an Azure Web App created, but unfortunately, you don't have the required tags. So now, as a learner, I will know how should I improve my solution. I should either add the missing tag or just reprovision the resource from scratch. Yeah, so student can translate the grader feedback into actions. That's how we use the solution feedback cycle to enable self-paced project-based learning.
Excellent, Marshall. So, this is a platform that you built within CMU, which is very extensive. You are CMU, one of the leading universities in the world. But for those institutions out there who don't have this infrastructure or your skill sets, there's Microsoft Learn. So can you show us a very similar demo within Microsoft Learn now?
Sure, no problem. So let's get started. The second lab demo here will be how the Microsoft Learn enable the learners to access project-based learning with this sandbox that will give them a consistent environment, and also let them access hands-on labs that is free of charge. Okay, so this is the exercise we are going to use today. As you can see, it's the same theme. It's also about how to use Azure Web App to host a website. Although this time we are going to use the Azure portal instead. Before we get started, we need to activate a sandbox. So by clicking this button, Microsoft Learn will create a brand new a sandbox environment so that there's a clean start point. And also, this is free of charge. So anyone with a Microsoft account will have access to all those hands-on labs. Yeah, so as we are talking, this sandbox is successfully created. Now let us get started with this exercise. Yeah, we can tell the Microsoft Learn module follow a similar pedagogical structure. We have the introduction of Azure technologies and concepts such as what is app service and how you create resources in Azure. And then there's a step-by-step, well-structured instruction of the hands-on activity. So now let's get started. We already have the sandbox here. And we need to remember to use this link to open the Azure portal. And we can confirm here, we are now in the Microsoft Learn sandbox. So we are ready to finish the activities. So in this exercise, we will create a WordPress website, which is a resource. So let's use this button to create a new resource.
Now we're actually creating this resource via the portal. So, we've shown an example of using CLI, and now we're going to show an example of using the Azure portal. So again, two different scenarios, but the same outcome.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, Lee. Now let's see what is the name of the product we are going to use. We are in the Azure Marketplace, and the product we will provision is called WordPress. Let's search by this keyword. And this is the product, so let's click create. When we are creating a cloud resource, apparently we need to specify the configuration. Yep, so let's fill the lab demo. And let's check the subscription, no change required. How about the resource group? We should use an existing resource group. This is pre-created by the, how about the database provider, so MySQL in-app. And we also need to configure the app service plan that is defined the next step. So let's click it and say whether we will use the existing one or create a new service plan. Okay, so we need to create a brand new plan. Location is Central US, so we are good. How about the pricing tier? Here we should select the F1 pricing tier for dev and test purpose. Dev and test F1. Oops. Okay, it's loaded. Select F1 and click apply. I think the configuration is good. Let's double check and confirm. So now they are ready to click the create button.
So again, we've done something very similar than you did before. We've created a WordPress site. You can now see the deployment status. Can you actually see the in-depth status of that deployment, Marshall, from the portal?
Yes, of course. So as you can see, here is a notifications panel. Will show the status of all the ongoing deployment. This is the deployment of the web app we just created. So let's open the deployment and see what we have. So it says the deployment is in progress. So most components are ready, and there'll be one more that will be ready soon, and it will take around 1 minute, so we can have some other discussion at the same time.
Yeah, excellent. So, as a student, we've used CLI to deploy a website. We've now used the Azure portal to deploy the website. And as you can see, this deployment is near enough ready. It's just now actually copying into the actual WordPress website into that server. Again, what the key learning aspects are here is, you've got that pedagogical layout in Microsoft Learn with both the hands-on experiments and then the knowledge check. And it allows students to really get hands-on with their practical learning in a learning environment. And again, we've done some really interesting things. So one of the key things that the Sail platform is actually a Canvas implementation using LTI. And as Microsoft, we've released a LTI extension for Microsoft Learn to allow educators to bring in Microsoft Learn resources directly into their learning management system. So again, I think there's been great synergies in how any institution can do this. Again, if you are an institution who's interested in becoming part of the Sail research project, please reach out to the Sail team. Again, it's just sail-platform.org. So we have our website live. So let's see what this looks like.
Okay, yeah, great. So now let's go to the resource. And as you can see, it includes all the metadata of the web app we just created, and of course, it includes the public URL. So let's visit our web app. Yeah, so as you can see, this is the very first visit of the web app, and behind the scenes, there's this a lazy provisioning behind the scenes. So the actual compute resources is provisioned and become ready now, and from now on, this website is up and running.
Excellent. So yeah, we now have a WordPress environment. As Marshall said, this is on a free instance, so it uses this terminology called lazy provisioning. So when you actually go to that URL, behind the scenes, the actual virtual machine is starting up, loading up, and actually allowing you to access those resources. So the first time you actually run this, it is quite slow. But once you've been hitting that website continually, the website is there and it's active. Again, it's just really around saving costs. So if the website isn't used, it spins down. So thank you, Marshall. I'm going to move back to my slides now and welcome all the speakers back and just close out the session. But I think it's been a great demo, really good use of how to actually deploy these services, and really interesting to see both those pedagogical aspects actually live and in use. So welcome back, everyone. So Majd, thank you for a great session. It was a great introduction to how the pedagogy of CMU courses are structured. David, huge thanks for sharing your experiences of that student experience. Marshall, again, huge thank you for all the engineering work that we've been doing together as Microsoft and CMU around tooling, tool sets, platform, infrastructure, and research. Myself and Majd have written a number of academic papers with the ACM. So we've been actually developing a paper on cloud curriculum and best practice. And again, lots of the research that has come out of both Microsoft and out of CMU is within those papers. We have a great set of events coming up. So please do join us on February the 19th, where we'll discuss cloud resources and elasticity and scaling those resources. February the 22nd is around automating cloud resources using resource management. February the 23rd is around monitoring cloud resources. And finally, on February the 26th is cloud security. All those sessions will be presented as Microsoft Learn live sessions. So they'll be on Learn TV. There'll be a session which is an hour to an hour and a half long, depending on the days. And it will be a cloud advocate and one of our Microsoft Learn student ambassadors who will be walking through an entire module in that time. So please do join those sessions. They'll be very hands-on. You can learn lots around this. So finally, we've got one great question from the audience, and it's for Majd. What are the key skills that you see students leaving the course with, and what roles, challenges within business can students support with these skills? I think you may be on mute, Majd.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, sorry.
Perfect, all right. So the most important skill is the ability for these individuals to learn how to learn, because the technology is evolving so quickly. And what we really instill in them is this ability, what David described, is this ability to figure things out as things evolve and continue to develop. We want to make surely that as individuals go through our courses, that they develop the skills to solve these real world problems under real world constraints. So we give them budgets in terms of not only time budgets, but actual dollar budgets on the cloud by which they need to be able to solve a problem, so that people can be thoughtful about how much does it cost on the cloud to solve this problem. We give them real world data so that they recognize that the real world is not a sanitized sandbox and things don't always look clean. The data could have a negative age in it. How do you deal with a record that has someone's age that's negative, right? Or someone's height being much larger than a number that is something that we would expect. So also, the infrastructure on the cloud evolves, changes. Sometimes it's going through a timeout or a transition. The solutions that you use on the cloud, they get updated regularly. And so recognizing that we are living in a fantastic world where we can deploy these applications using these global cloud solutions, at the same time, we want them to recognize that you have to build a robust solution that can target this ever-evolving domain so that your solution can meet the requirements, the quality of service requirements, and all of the other functional requirements that you have, and be able to add real value to whoever decided to add you to their team so that you can help them get ahead. Those are the problems that we are preparing our learners for. And I would like to encourage all of the students who are listening right now and all of the people in jobs that would like to develop their cloud skill sets to go ahead and start somewhere so that you can see how well you like it, and you recognize that by doing things, you develop your confidence and your ability to solve problems, and then you can't stop because it's just such a great feeling. And for the educators on the call, Lee, first, I would like to encourage all of you to attend the sessions that are here, because Lee and the team are going to dig deeper into these domains of elasticity, how do you manage cloud resources, monitoring a deployment and making sure it's doing the right thing, and then securing a deployment. So take a look there and then start, because there's zero cost besides your time and effort, right? I mean, so you can just point your browser to Microsoft Learn and start and see how far you get, and see if this is something that you want to develop your skills with. The other approach that I would also encourage, Lee, is that for the learners to look at jobs on the cloud and see what jobs are suitable and what jobs they want to go after, and then go skill yourself so that you can hopefully prepare yourself so that you can get that job.
Thank you, Majd. So I think, from my perspective, you picked up on two key things there, so anyone can build $1 million infrastructure, but not everyone has $1 million. So again, having optimized cloud is really key. The second one is the ability to learn for free. You know, with Microsoft Learn, the sandboxes, which Marshall just showed you, are 2 hours of free compute to allow you to start learning at zero cost. So again, get your hands dirty, get into this project-based learning approach of doing hands-on activities and learning real firsthand of those different technologies and implementations. You know, from my perspective, I'd just like to thank everyone who joined us for today. And just finish with, you know, all these sessions will be recorded. They'll be available on Microsoft Learn, on Learn TV, available to download and watch on demand. Again, the learning paths are there today. You can get started with these learning paths, taking this best practice from CMU. And, you know, finally, I'd just like everyone, please, to complete the session survey. It helps us understand what you want to learn. If this is useful, please share your feedback. And thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great set of day, and everybody please keep safe and well. So a huge thank you from all my speakers. Does anyone have any parting comments in the last minute just to share with the audience?
I just want to say this has been an incredible collaboration with Microsoft, and we look forward to continuing to grow our offerings in the future. So please keep coming and checking. And for the educators who are listening, check out the SAIL platform and see if it's suitable for your institution.
So thank you, everyone, and thank you for spending the time with us on Microsoft Learn Live and Learn TV. Thank you.
Take care, Lee.